When markets are free to work, America thrives. We see this all the time, and we've seen that in energy abundance, competition, and innovations that emerge naturally when government steps back and entrepreneurs step forward. The path to a stronger economy and more reliable grid isn't more government planning, it's less. Hello. Welcome to this week's Economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. It's really a pleasure to have you here. We've got a lot to talk about energy and the environment and how we can live in a more prosperous place, Earth, by having more energy and more abundance. One of the places that has a lot of abundance is Houston, Texas. Houston is not only where I was born and grew up, so it's kind of my hometown, but it's also the shirt that I'm wearing now, made by Roback. It's one of the Houston shirts that has the Texas flag on the back. And thought of what I want to discuss today about energy abundance. Energy capital of the world is Houston, Texas, so no better place to do it. But there's a lot that's going right, and maybe even more that's going wrong in some cases that I really wanted to talk to you about today. So let's first talk about why energy is so important. And then let's get into some of the consequences of policy that we see across the country, even in places where I live, like in Texas. And then let's look at some of the trade-offs, or what some consider the solutions. As Thomas Sowell always said, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And I believe that. But it's important in the modern parlance, modern talk conversation to really think about what those solutions might be. And so I wanted to go through some of these things. But first, I wanted to start off with a quote by economist Julian Simon. He said that, quote, "Energy is the master resource because energy enables us to convert one material into another. Natural scientists continue to learn more about the transformation of materials from one form to another with the aid of energy. Energy will be even more important," end quote. Energy powers our homes, fuels our industries, and drives the innovations that secure our future. However, when Washington attempts to micromanage the energy sector through regulations, subsidies, and political agendas, ultimately, it distorts the market and drives up cost. But it doesn't have to be this way, guys. When markets are free to work, America thrives. We see this all the time, and we've seen that in energy abundance, competition, and innovations that emerge naturally when government steps back and entrepreneurs step forward. The path to a stronger economy and more reliable grid isn't more government planning, it's less. So in this week's episode, I'm going to discuss how we got here, what's at stake, and the 4 steps we must take to unleash America's full energy potential. From ending regulations and subsidies to rejecting ESG mandates to fueling innovation, the blueprint here is clear. Trust markets, not bureaucrats, to power America's future. Remember, you can find this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, my website, vanceginn.com, and my Substack newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com. Please go and check those out and share this with your friends and families. All right. So how did we get here? Well, when you look at this, that under many presidents, including the most recent being President Biden and governors across the states, energy policy has been defined by top-down planning and heavy-handed regulation. Especially, when you look at after Nixon administration, LBJ administration, Nixon was whenever the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, was formed. So, you have all these things that are going on to expand the size and scope of government from D.C. These distortions raised prices, constrained supply, and left America with a fragile, less reliable grid, and more costly in the process. Well, with President Trump now in office, we're seeing a course correction. Policies that promote energy and abundance, restore competition, and put common sense back at the center of America's energy strategy. That's what we need more of. So for the future, we don't need Washington to engineer our energy future. We need the government to get out of the way. Come on. That means stripping away tax favoritism, streamlining environmental permitting, and unleashing domestic production. Energy markets, not bureaucrats, should decide where capital flows. Energy permitting remains one of the biggest bottlenecks that are out there. Under outdated laws such as the National Environmental Policy Act, the NEPA, vital projects are often stalled for years. Pipelines, liquefied natural gas, terminals, and power plants are all held hostage to red tape. If we want a resilient grid, and we all do, I believe, and lower prices in the process, which I also think we all want, approvals must move at the speed of innovation, not the pace of bureaucracy. At the core is one clear principle. Government should not control economic outcomes. It should not control our decisions. It should set fair rules, enforce them consistently, and then step aside. America doesn't need another round of industrial policy or populist planning. We need a return to classical liberal principles, free markets, limited government, and individual freedom. That's the foundation for unleashing America's full energy potential and people's potential everywhere. Not just in one state, but everywhere. So step one here is reduce regulatory impacts. Federal and state red tape is choking America's energy future. Burdensome regulations hinder growth, impede innovation, and hinder competition from thriving. If we want a resilient energy sector, we must trust markets, not bureaucrats. A light touch framework, if there's any touch at all, that unleashes competition and innovation is the only way forward. So the federal policy solutions here is that a free market approach that minimizes government intervention and allows energy prices to reflect supply and demand. Imagine that, the market is the most efficient and sustainable way to manage America's energy resources and protect the environment. So what can states do? State governments should remove obstacles that hinder private investment in energy production and distribution. This ensures a competitive market that drives down cost, improves service quality, and encourages technological advancement. Does Texas lead? Well, Texas runs its power grid through the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, and has a competitive retail market for electricity, but not always for production. You hear a lot about the competitive retail market that's in Texas, and that is true. There's a different options that you can choose from, which isn't always the case in a lot of states. But at the production side, the amount there is really being distorted about how much money is going to different sources of energy that are out there. However, given decades of forced taxpayer funding for subsidies and preferential tax treatment, Texas leads in unreliable wind and solar and energy. The grid's real backbone, though, is reliable natural gas, which delivers power in all conditions and dominates the amount of power that's being provided across the state. Texas should build on that stream by cutting red tape, rejecting federal subsidies and local abatements, and advocating for a full repeal of the green energy subsidies in Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. About half of that was eliminated from the One Big Beautiful Bill, which was really important, but there's still more that should be done. Now, an argument is that some of these contracts are still being laid out, but a lot of these projects are still in the early stages if they've even started at all. So why not go ahead and stop those now? Not only help the budget problem, which I've talked a lot about, but also help to stop putting the thumb of big government on to our lives in the energy space. Free market energy leadership, not Washington's mandates, will keep Texas strong. Related to this is that I discussed how energy regulations hold back growth and why markets trust unleashes innovation. Check that out on the show notes page. Step 2, green energy subsidies. Well, subsidies, tax breaks, and other government handouts, what they do is they distort the market and undermine prosperity. When politicians funnel taxpayer dollars, which is what they're doing, into green energy agendas, or what some call the green energy scam, often to win votes through virtual signaling, they waste scarce resources. Even worse, sometimes, they force families and businesses to rely on energy sources that frequently fail due to lack of wind and sun. These are intermittent sort of energy sources. These push people into hardship and poverty when these methods inevitably fail. Solutions here should be looking at an agenda that increases prosperity instead of poverty. The virtual signaling props up unreliable wind and solar energy. These sources come with high costs, minimal benefits, and significant risk. Beyond hemorrhaging taxpayer dollars, this agenda leaves families more vulnerable and increases poverty. It must stop, guys. learn from our failures. We have already seen the dangers of this approach. During the historic Texas freeze 4 years ago in 2021, when temperatures plummeted and ice and snow swept across the states, thousands were left without power. The reliance on unreliable energy contributed to blackouts that tragically resulted in about 250 estimated deaths across the state. This may have been avoided if politicians didn't force Americans to depend on energy sources that can't deliver. Instead, we need to let markets work. Subsidies, tax breaks, and other artificial market distortions create an uneven playing field. Businesses that don't qualify for subsidies or can't afford to, quote-unquote, go green are pushed out. Families lose choices. Prosperity suffers. Individuals and businesses should be free to choose their energy sources without government interference. Letting the market work is the only way to ensure greater prosperity, innovation, and reliability. Related reading to this is that I recently wrote a piece in the Washington Examiner about what the Trump administration can do to unwind the Biden-era green energy subsidies and restore market trust. Step 3 here is eliminate public ESG investing. The environmental, social, and governance, that's ESG, investing has gained traction under the banner of sustainability, social justice, and ethical governance. But in practice, ESG often delivers lower returns, diverts capital from productive investments, and imposes political agendas on taxpayers. Taxpayer money should be managed with one priority in mind: protecting liberty. That means limiting government, not just chasing politically driven goals, where too often it really is. So the solutions here are that we need to stop undermining economic growth. Doing these things that lead the nation, and when you look at what's happening with Texas and others, is that look, we're leading the nation in crude oil and natural gas production. ESG mandates pose a threat to their economic foundations. Implementing ESG standards disrupts energy investment, reduces growth, and increases costs for consumers. By diverting capital into underperforming ESG funds, states risk weakening one of their strongest competitive advantages. Fortunately, Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana aren't alone in rejecting ESG mandates, especially for government funds like employee retirement accounts, teacher retirement accounts, money that is funded by the taxpayer. I actually don't have a huge issue at all with people and their private money, putting money into ESG funds or something that's in there. I choose not to do that because I've looked at the returns and the returns just aren't there. And I really do believe it's more about virtual signaling versus what's best for the country and what's best for the profitability of those firms. And we're seeing that now, I think, where many firms are backing off of this. So, and unfortunately, that's because states are pushing back against the misuse of taxpayer dollars. Florida and West Virginia, among others, have passed laws to prevent taxpayer funds from being funneled into ESG-driven investments. The momentum is growing, folks. States are recognizing that ESG comes with real economic costs and undermines accountability. We should leave these investments to the private sector. The opportunity costs of ESG are enormous. Diverting capital from high-performing, market-driven investments into politically motivated projects hinders growth, increases consumer prices, and wastes taxpayer dollars once again. If individuals or private firms want to invest in ESG, they are free to do so and to take on the risks that come with it. But the government has no money of its own. It should use taxpayer dollars conservatively, transparently, and responsibly to preserve liberty and support growth, not to bankroll political agendas. Related reading to this is that I wrote at the Pelican Institute why government has no business investing in ESG and why these choices should be left to the productive private sector. Step 4, unleash innovation. The U.S. can secure its future prosperity by reducing government involvement and allowing markets to function. Market-driven solutions strengthen infrastructure, support a growing population, and sustain America's role as a global leader. This isn't just about keeping the lights on. It's about preserving the entrepreneurial spirit that defines our nation and ensuring that people have the freedom to prosper. So what are the solutions? We've got to look at infrastructure. States must expand and modernize their infrastructure to meet surging energy demand and capitalize on the economic benefits. Growth in cryptocurrency, mining, data centers, and artificial intelligence is driving much of this demand. Often viewed skeptically, these sectors are integral to the modern economy and represent the front lines of the next economic revolution. I truly believe that. What we should be doing is relying on market competition. Rather than letting governments dictate winners and losers, states should allow competition to determine the most efficient and reliable energy sources. A free market approach ensures the best ideas rise to the top, fostering innovation and delivering progress that benefits everyone. Check out my recent piece in the Austin American-Statesman, where I explain how Texas can lead the nation in economic and technological advancements by unleashing efficient energy. So in conclusion here today, America's energy future depends on restoring trust in markets and removing the heavy hand of government. Regulations, subsidies, ESG mandates, and political interference have distorted the system for far too long, driving up cost and weakening reliability. Returning to limited government, free markets, and entrepreneurial freedom can help build a resilient and competitive energy sector that meets tomorrow's demands. America remains a global leader in both economic and technological progress. Together, these reforms form a blueprint for lasting prosperity. The choice before us is straightforward: continue down the path of government distortion and increased dependence, or chart a new course grounded in freedom and opportunity. By trusting markets and empowering innovators, America can secure a more reliable energy future, strengthening its economy, and ultimately let people prosper. You know, when I look at this, over the years, I've had many fantastic guests on the Let People Prosper show to discuss energy policy. You can find some of those over in the show notes page at vanceginn.substack.com, where I really think that you will not only see some great folks who came in, had a great discussion with them about energy and the different sources and everything else. But I really think it's important for us to continue to remind ourselves that energy is the master resource, as economist Julian Simon said when I started this show. So I hope that you've learned something today. Share this with your friends and family. They too need to know the importance of energy. I should note that my dissertation was titled An Examination of the Macroeconomic Effects of Oil Price Shocks. And my more academic research is in the area of energy, looking at gasoline prices and their relationship with oil prices, the retail diesel prices and the relationship with oil prices, and the wholesale price, and a number of other areas. And the reason why I enjoy energy so much and researching it is because it is a very, very dynamic market. Oil prices change every day. When you look at it's a global oil market. So it's not only just domestic prices that we have to worry about or be concerned about, but also globally with those prices like the West Texas Intermediate price or the Brent crude oil price over there. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things to look at here. And so, anyway, I hope you learned something today. Thank you for joining me. Share this with your friends and family. And until next time, let people prosper.